Now coming to the management of PIH, the basics of PIH management includes the steps for initial evaluation. That is, first of all, we have to admit the patients, and all patients with raised BP should always be admitted. We have to take the detailed history of premonitory symptoms like severe headache, visual disturbances, and epigastric pain. First, BP recording should be taken during admission. Then we have to repeat the BP 4RD if it is a case of non-severe preeclampsia and gestational hypertension, and if the BP is raised more than 160 by 110, then BP is to be repeated after 15 minutes. Weight monitoring is very important because in preeclampsia there can be pathological edema in which there is a rapid weight gain that is almost more than 1 kilograms per week. So daily weight monitoring is also important. Lab investigations to be sent like CBC for hemoglobin estimation, platelet count, etc. Liver function test for measuring the transaminase levels, bilirubin, etc. Serum creatinine and renal function test should be done. Fetal well-being with CTG, that is cardiotocography, and fetal monitoring should also be done, and ultrasound for amniotic fluid evaluation and weight measurement should also be advised. Now there is one terminology known as an impending eclampsia. What is impending eclampsia? Which it occurs uh, just these are the symptoms that occurs before an eclampsia or a seizure episode, and this include a headache, visual disturbance, and epigastric pain. The management includes antihypertensive, that is we have to control the BP. We have to administer magnesium sulfate, and if there is impending eclampsia, then immediate termination of pregnancy is advised irrespective of the gestational age. Now, if there are no signs of impending eclampsia, then initial management includes the stabilization, that is magnesium sulfate to prevent seizures, and antihypertensive to prevent so after stabilization, we will go for the definitive management, which is the termination of pregnancy and depends on the gestational age of the baby. So if the gestational age is more than 34 weeks, then we can terminate a severe preeclampsia patient. And if the gestational age is around 37 weeks, then non-severe preeclampsia warrants termination of pregnancy. Now there is one PEACOCK study in which angiogenic markers, that is VEGF, PLGF, SFLT, do not determine the need for delivering patients with preeclampsia. Now what is the individual management for non-severe preeclampsia? For non-severe preeclampsia, inpatient versus outpatient care. For patients with mild preeclampsia, that is non-severe patient features, recommendation is limited physical activity. Complete bed rest is not recommended, and if limited physical activity can be achieved at home, then we can send the patient home based on the instruction given. BP monitoring twice daily, means morning and evening BP should be measured. NST to be repeated twice weekly starting from 32 weeks, means we have to do NST on every 3 days. And biophysical profile measurement should also be done weekly. So color Doppler Manning score is to be done weekly, while estimated fetal weight can be calculated every month. So once a month, estimated fetal weight assessment, color Doppler and biophysical profile weekly, CTG bi-weekly, and BP monitoring twice daily. Lab investigation in case of non-severe preeclampsia is twice weekly, and in case of gestational hypertension, it can be done every week. Umbilical artery Doppler in the presence of IUGR weekly, ultrasound for fetal growth every month, and instruction about the signs and symptoms of impending eclampsia, and the termination of pregnancy can be done after 37 weeks of pregnancy. Now what is the role of antihypertensive? So if the BP is more than 160 by 110, or if the BP is persistently raised, that is more than 150 by 100 millimeters of mercury in at least 2 readings, then we have to start the drug. So this is the indication of starting an antihypertensive. The oral antihypertensive that can be started are labetalol, nifedipine, alpha methyl dopa. Now, what is the management of severe preeclampsia? Severe preeclampsia is when either the BP is more than 160 by 110 millimeters of mercury, or there are signs of end organ damage along with proteinuria. The management includes antihypertensive, magnesium sulfate administration, hospital admission, and maternal and fetal assessment. In non-severe preeclampsia, we do not administer magnesium sulfate, while in severe preeclampsia, we have to give magnesium sulfate. Indication of termination of pregnancy is when the BP is grossly deranged, that is uncontrolled hypertension or persistent severe preeclampsia, impending eclampsia or HELLP syndrome. There is development of pulmonary edema. LFT and KFT are deranged grossly, placental abruption, fetal distress, and on umbilical artery Doppler there is end diastolic flow or the reverse diastolic flow. IUGR along with oligo is also an indication for immediate termination of pregnancy. Mode of delivery can be vaginal, and it could be done through induction of labor, and if needed then we can do cesarean section also. If there is patient with severe preeclampsia at less than 32 weeks of gestation, then high chances of failure of induction of labor and patient can land into cesarean section. Now, cesarean section is reserved for obstetric indications only, like abruptio, fetal distress, severe preeclampsia at less than 32 weeks, and the anesthesia of choice is a neuraxial anesthesia, that is either epidural, spinal, or epidural plus spinal anesthesia. General anesthesia is not recommended because in patients with preeclampsia with severe features there is generalized edema and the larynx is also edematous. This can lead to induction difficulty. And initially after general anesthesia BP increases, so there is risk of eclampsia also. Hence in such patients with preeclampsia with severe features, general anesthesia is not recommended. Now, what are the prerequisites for conservative management? First, we have to stabilize the maternal and fetal conditions, no sign and symptoms of impending eclampsia and HELLP syndrome, and we have to control the BP first. So for conservative management, LFT and RFT should be normal. There is no fetal distress, means there is reassuring fetal heart rate. No IUGR, no oligo, means L-Liker is adequate. There is no IUGR and there is no premature rupture of membrane. Conservative management can be tried for 48 hours, and in these 48 hours we have to give the dexamethasone to the patient. Injectable corticosteroid is given for fetal lung maturity according to ACOG. ACOG recommends betamethasone administration, while NICE recommends dexamethasone administration. Frequent evaluation of the vital signs of the mother and urine output, daily lab investigation in case of severe preeclampsia, or if we have to evaluate the patient for HELLP syndrome is recommended. Or we can do alternate investigations also. Now, after 48 hours, after conservative management for 48 hours, we can either go with termination of pregnancy and can continue the pregnancy till 34 weeks of gestation. So after 48 hours, we have to reassess the patient again, and if now the patient is developing any contraindication to conservative management, then we have to terminate the pregnancy. There is no contraindication for conservative management, then continue pregnancy till 34 weeks, and at 34 weeks we can do induction of labor. So inpatient management means BP is to be repeated every 4 hourly. We have to stop the magnesium sulfate. We have to continue the antihypertensives that we have started. Triple L, that is daily fetal movement count and left lateral lie is advised. Lab investigations are repeated every alternate day, and if patient is not financially stable, then we can do at least weekly. The lab investigations include the CBC, RFT, serum electrolytes, LFT, and urine protein excretion. CTG is done daily. Color Doppler Manning score is done weekly, and fetal weight is to be done every 14th day, that is 2 weekly. Ultrasound for fetal growth and Liker once in every 2 weeks, and Doppler should be done weekly. Now, what are the indications of starting antihypertensive in such patient? If the BP is more than 160 by 110 millimeters of mercury, or if the BP is 150 by 100 millimeters of mercury in two readings 15 hours apart, then we have to start antihypertensive. And these dangerous hypertension can lead to, if not controlled properly, can cause cerebrovascular hemorrhage or stroke. Hypertensive encephalopathy can lead to eclampsia, placental abruption, and congestive heart failure. Long-standing hypertension can lead to Charcot-Bouchard aneurysm in the middle cerebral artery, which supplies the basal ganglia and thalamus, and there is high risk of rupture also. Now, what are the first-line antihypertensive drugs? We can advise IV labetalol, that causes maternal hypotension and bradycardia because it acts on beta receptors non-selectively. So it leads to both reduction in BP and reduction in heart rate, that is hypertension and bradycardia. IV hydralazine causes reduction in BP, but it can cause reflex tachycardia means more maternal tachycardia and palpitations. Oral nifedipine can also be advised. So 2 IV drugs and 1 oral drug is advised. All have the similar efficacy, and there is no drug which is found to be superior. Even nifedipine lowers the BP more quickly, but because labetalol is safe, is more safe as compared to nifedipine, so we advise IV labetalol. Other antihypertensive drugs like verapamil, which is a calcium channel blocker, ketanserin, nimodipine, nicardia, nitroglycerin, and nitroprusside can also be advised. Now, coming to antihypertensive in pregnancy, what is labetalol? Labetalol is a non-selective blocker, means it blocks both alpha and beta receptors. And in severe preeclampsia, what is the dose? Maximum dose of 300 milligrams can be given. And what is the protocol? First, we have to give 20 milligram IV bolus, followed by 40 milligrams IV. In the next 10 minutes, we have to wait for the 10 minutes, and if the BP is not controlled, then we have to give 80 dose, and if again the BP is not controlled, then we have to repeat a dose of 80 milligrams. So in this way, there is 20, 40, 80, 80, 80 and 300 milligrams is the maximum dose that can be given. Through oral route, we can start labetalol 100 milligrams BD, and the maximum dose is 2400 milligrams per day. BD per day. Contraindication includes because it blocks beta receptors, then it can cause exaggeration of the asthma and the heart failure. So labetalol is contraindicated in asthma and heart failure patient. What are the side effects? Side effects includes bradycardia and hypotension, and this hypotension can cause fetal growth restriction in the baby also. Second is hydralazine. Hydralazine is only indicated in severe preeclampsia, and it is not to be used in mild preeclampsia. It is only available in the IV form, and mechanism of action is peripheral vasodilation. Action starts within 10 to 20 minutes, means there is rapid onset of action. The dose is maximum 30 milligrams, and 5 milligrams IV bolus over 2 minutes is given, and repeat 5 to 10 milligrams after 20 minutes. The side effects includes tachycardia, headache and hypotension. ACOG 2010 guidelines says that it should be given with fluid, means 500 ml of crystalloid fluid should be given before first dose of IV hydralazine. Now, what is nifedipine? Nifedipine is a calcium channel blocker. It also has a rapid onset of action, that is 5 to 10 minutes, and it can be given in mild preeclampsia. In mild preeclampsia, we give extended release tablet, that is 30 milligrams OD, and a maximum dose of 120 milligram can be given. In patients with severe preeclampsia, 10 milligrams per oral dose is given, 10 milligrams repeated in 20 to 30 minutes, and only 2 doses are recommended in severe preeclampsia. Now, there is another formulation known as nicardia, known as nifedipine retard, which is an intermediate acting nifedipine, 20 milligram tablet, 2 dose maximum, or extended release tablets 30 milligram stat can be advised. Sublingual nifedipine is not used, which is most important point, that sublingual nifedipine can cause significant drop in BP, compromise uteroplacental blood flow, and MI also. Side effects includes tachycardia and headache. Hence, nifedipine is not given sublingually. Now, there is another drug, that is alpha methyl dopa. It is used in patients with chronic hypertension, or if the BP is more than 150 by 100 millimeters of mercury. It cannot be used in hypertensive crisis, which is when the BP is more, because it is slower acting and it is only available in the oral form. So in emergency situations like hypertensive crisis or hypertensive emergency, we do not advise alpha methyl dopa. It acts centrally, and the main mechanism of action is alpha 2 agonistic activity within the brain. It decreases sympathetic outflow, and the delayed responsive action occurs, that is 3 to 6 hours. In chronic hypertension patient, we can start 250 to 500 6 to 8 hourly, and maximum 3 grams per day is advised. Side effects includes because central acting drug, it can cause excessive sedation, and the long term side effects are headache, hepatitis, fluid retention, postpartum depression. Oral first line antihypertensives in chronic hypertension are the labetalol, nifedipine, and the alpha methyl dopa. Now, whenever antihypertensive is given in preeclampsia with severe features, we have to check the BP every 15 minutes, check fetal heart rate, and if there is fetal distress, then always rule out placental abruption, which can occur due to sudden drop in the BP of the patient. Never overcorrect blood pressure during antepartum period because it can compromise the uterine blood flow and can cause IUGR in the baby. So the target blood pressure during pregnancy is 135 by 85 millimeters of mercury, not lower than that. Now, what is the role of nitroglycerin? Nitroglycerin is indicated in patients with hypertension and pulmonary edema, and it is given at a rate of 10 milligrams per minute through IV infusion. Nitroprusside is the last drug or the last resort for refractory hypertension where all drugs have failed and it is not done routinely, can lead to cyanide toxicity, and hence it is the last resort for refractory hypertension. Loop diuretics can also be advised, but it is not advised for preeclampsia per se. This is advised for hemoconcentration or compromised uteroplacental blood flow. It is contraindicated in patients with preeclampsia. Indications include pulmonary edema and after delivery postpartum hypovolemia. It is not contraindicated in chronic hypertension, but they are not the first line drugs. They are not to be used before 20 weeks of gestation. Now, there are certain drugs which are absolutely contraindicated in pregnancy. This includes ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, beta blockers, and diazoxide. So, these drugs are contraindicated in pregnancy absolutely. Now, what is the management of fluid therapy and pulmonary edema? In patients with preeclampsia, there is oligouria and hemoconcentration. There is natural tendency to replenish intravascular volume. Rigorous IV fluid in preeclampsia can cause pulmonary edema. So, the rate of fluid given in such patients should be checked, and in if the input is maintained at 80 ml per hour and output is 30 ml per hour, means more input but less output, 60 to 125 milliliter per hour or 80 ml per hour, such that the urine output is at least 30 ml per hour. We have to catheterize the patient to monitor the urine output, and patients with vomiting, diarrhea, excessive blood loss, we have to give more IV fluids but in a graded manner. No role of plasma volume expanders like albumin or starch polymers, and patient with preeclampsia without severe features, we can also advise oral fluids if patient can take oral medications also. So, what is the management of pulmonary edema? Patients generally develop pulmonary edema in postpartum period. Now, what is the reason of pulmonary edema? Because of increased pulmonary capillary permeability, there is cardiogenic edema due to ventricular failure due to increased afterload just after delivery. Cardiogenic edema is more common in obese and females with chronic hypertension, and it can also occur due to the aspiration of gastric contents at the time of convulsions as in eclampsia. Now, what is the definitive management of preeclampsia with severe features? Termination pregnancy at 34 weeks. Mode of delivery can be vaginal or cesarean. Vaginal delivery is preferred, and do not routinely limit the second stage of labor. We have to apply forceps or vacuum prophylactically in case of severe hypertension not responding to initial treatment to accelerate the second stage of labor and hence the delivery. Now, cesarean section is reserved for obstetric indications. Epidural analgesia can be given in case of vaginal delivery for pain relief, antihypertensive effect. It also decreases pain, hence peripheral vasodilation occurs and improves the uteroplacental blood flow. Now, about monitoring, we have to continuously monitor a patient for BP. In case of severe preeclampsia, fetal heart rate monitoring is done continuously. We have to monitor the BP, pulse rate, SpO2 hourly. So, hourly we have to monitor, every hour we have to take the BP, pulse rate and SpO2. And active management of third stage of labor is recommended with oxytocin. Methyl argometrin is contraindicated because it can in turn increase BP also. And we have to carefully check for postpartum hemorrhage also. Now, what is blood loss at the time of delivery in PIH? Because there is hemoconcentration, lack of normal pregnancy induced hypervolemia, and patient poorly tolerate even normal blood loss at the time of delivery in case of preeclampsia. So, we always have to rule out PPH in cases of oligouria and decrease in BP in patient of PIH. So, if in cases of preeclampsia the BP of the patient is reduced, then we have to check for oligouria and reduction in BP, decrease in BP after delivery or oligouria after delivery are the are the danger signs for PPH. Frequent evaluation of hematocrit is also recommended to detect PPH. Now, what are the postpartum guidelines for BP monitoring? So, according to NICE guidelines, BP should be less than 130 by 80 millimeters of mercury in postpartum period. And if the BP is this, then we have to stop the antihypertensive. If the BP is between 130 to 140 or 80 to 90 millimeters of mercury, then dose is reduced and we have to change the antihypertensive to more conventional drugs. Until the patient is admitted, we have to measure the BP 4 times per day, means every 6 hourly. So this is according to NICE guidelines. While ACOG recommends that BP monitoring at 72 postpartum and then 7 to 10 days after delivery. So the monitoring is less in case of ACOG. ACOG says that third day you have to measure the BP and then at 7 to 10 days, and if there is any symptoms developing, then patient has to report early. Antihypertensive is advised only if BP is persistently raised, that is more than 150 by 100 millimeters of mercury. Now, what is the need of thromboprophylaxis in postpartum period? We have to consider enoxaparin based on individual risk factor. If there is obesity, PPH or immobilization history, then we can advise low molecular weight heparin. Screen for Apla's syndrome, other thrombophilias if the patient develops preeclampsia early in pregnancy, that is less than 20 weeks, or concomitant preterm birth, late fetal loss and IUGR is there, then we can screen the patient for Apla syndrome.